students need incentives. And it was a long way. We had adapted the Japanese belt system, which was basically white, then brown and black. But from white to brown can be 8 years. And also a person standing there that tomorrow is ready for his brown belt. So what we decided, it was necessary to create a belt system. So we had a supply company. We simply contacted our suppliers in Japan and said, what colors of belts can you come up with? It was a matter of supply and demand. Green, we loved it. Blue, loved that. Purple had already been used in judo and things like this. Then we had yellow and orange. I mean, what macho martial artist back then would put on an orange belt or a yellow belt? We flipped a coin and it became orange. Later, we also reluctantly added yellow. Now it's so standard that even the Japanese have now accepted this as the lower ranks for the judo.
Well, this is what I found so fascinating, because when I was coming up through the ranks in Kempo back in the early 70s and just starting up, there was no yellow belt. It was orange, and then suddenly, boom, there was a yellow belt.
It came in 2 different phases. Of course, my instructor, Ed Parker, realized it was a good idea, so he adapted it. So he adapted the yellow belt, first of all, as an adult program. We adapted as a youth belt and thing. We both had the same idea of only 10 self-defense techniques. And then reluctantly over the years, we also added it to the adults, so it's such a integral part of the system now, people think it's always existed. But it's an incentive for a person to get out there, each belt level. It's, once again, it's the carrot or the stick, and the carrot being one of the rewards, yes.
Now, another thing that you were one of the innovators was with fighting teams. Now, you created one of the most successful fighting teams in the history of karate with the Tracy Karate Team. How did that all come about? And also, another important thing, the checkered gi that everyone identifies with the Tracys.
By the early 70s and the late 60s, we had started franchising, and we were actually the largest chain of karate schools, not in the United States, but in the entire world. You have to remember at this point, the Koreans were not really upon the scene and things like this. And as we're looking around, how do you get recognition? It's just the same as auto racing. The automobiles, you know, they identify with the winners and things like this. So at that point, the Kempo had always been a fighting style, but it was so aggressive that you couldn't win in a ring. My brother and I looked around. The 2 top fighters in the country and the world at that time were Chuck Norris and Joe Louis. I didn't realize at that point that Chuck Norris was available, so we approached Joe Louis, and sure enough, then he came in and became our national director. And what we had now, of course, we had the Renegades Tracy, and we had the bad boy Joe Louis, which is a natural, just like you can see in this. And to make it even more distinguishing then, just like in wrestlers, you can see today, each one comes out, The Undertaker, you know, they've got something that identifies it. So I give Joe Louis all the credit on this. He saw this psychedelic poster. Black, checkered, psychedelic, whenever you move, the eyes went in and out of focus. And he had it designed into the famous Tracy fighting uniform, so that when you saw anyone, you saw Chuck, you saw Joe, you saw JT Will, any of these people, but when it walked out there, just like you identified with it, and the only ones who ever wore that were winners. So it was quite a psychological thing. When you walked in the ring and a guy had a checkered gi, you knew you were up for a fight. Okay. The next thing also I'll give Joe Louis very much credit for is that he realized that the top people needed recognition, and he designed at that time what we considered the best looking black belt certificate they could get. But remember, this was never given, this was never bought. Tracy's always had, you could never buy certificates. We don't charge ever for belt testing. When you had that diploma, now of course we've ended up even better. But Joe was one of those people, I have to give him credit. Not only was he a fighter out there, but he understood what it took to motivate people and give them the rewards. And because of this, like say, I'll be honest with you, the only team out there that could ever beat us was Chuck Norris. Chuck, I'm still looking to get even on that.